Hello, my name is Marcus Curran, and today I'll be presenting to you the effect of electrolyte solution on the formation of Lichtenberg figures. So first, I'd like to talk about how I got the idea of doing a project about electrolyte solution and Lichtenberg figures. It all started, I don't know, I've been interested in the topic for a while. I'd say I got interested in it about last year. At my church, a lady told a story about how she got struck by lightning, and I went to Google and looked up what happened to somebody after they got struck by lightning, and the formations on their body were kind of fractaling patterns, and that's called Lichtenberg figures. Um, that's basically how I got into it. I've been into it for a long time, and when I got the chance, I heard about the ISEF Expo and about science fair. I thought that'd be the perfect opportunity for me to do my project. Um, so how it got started? The first thing I started with in my project was research. Nothing could have happened in the project if I didn't know I was doing. Big safety was a big part of it. I definitely Science is a big aspect of my project. I need to know exactly what I'm doing so I can be safe, and get my results. So my procedure was a research. I researched Lichtenberg figures. I watched a lot of videos. I read a lot of articles about the dangers, how they happen, their effects in real society. Like Lichtenberg figures will appear inside circuits that are meant to insulate wire. So that's one of my applications for my experiment. So engineers and people can know what to do and what not to do and what to use and what not to use. They can pick up my experiment to kind of give them a little bit of insight about Lichtenberg figures and know what they are when they run into them in the field. Um, I think the first thing I had to do after research was get my material list together. Um, the most important thing to buy was the transformer. Nothing could happen. I could not create any Lichtenberg figures without a big power source. And so my neon light transformers, when I get that. Some people use microwave transformers, but due to the fact that I'm new in this field, I felt like that wouldn't be very safe. So I chose the safe option of a neon light transformer, an Allenton neon power supply is what it's called. I also got a little bit of extra knowledge out of this because I got the chance to not only wire a light switch, which was going to be my fail safe switch, making sure that it was a little bit got an extra line of safety. I also got to wire my socket. The power supply did not come with a socket to go into the wall like a plug. So I got the chance to learn about wiring that stuff, and it was really great. I felt like that was a great addition, something else I picked up. Buying the wood was nothing hard. One thing I do wish I did differently that I do recommend to do differently for other experiments. I wish that I would have bought a softer wood with less grain. I mean, the grain was really tough on the wood that I bought, and so that most of the burns stuck to the grain. That's not really what I wanted. I wanted the burns to spiral out, and that also kind of had to do with the power of not the power, but the conductivity of the electrolyte solution, because the more conductive electrolyte solutions, like this one here, the baking soda solution spiraled out and went against the grain. But you can see the solution for Gatorade and the solution for salt water, those stuck to the grain. Even though they did make fractals and they did burn, they still stuck to the grain, which is not really what I wanted at all. The experiment was not a failure at all. The experiment was great. I mean, I really enjoyed the experiment. The whole process was fun. The only thing about the experiment, you have to be very safe because Lichtenberg figures are very dangerous to create. So the biggest implication here is safety. The first thing I had to do for the experiment was soak my wood. So it all started. I soaked my wood in four liquids but three solutions because water was my control, but water is not a dry solution. So I predicted that water was not going to have any fractal burning. I predicted that it would just be non-conductive, but that was not the case. There was a very small burn circuit right there with treeing. I mean, the treeing happened. There were no small branches, and I think that's due to the fact that the water could not conduct electricity enough, so it just burned through. Um, the water solution surprised me. Well, the water surprised me because it made branching when I expected it to make none at all. My other three solutions were salt water, baking soda mixture, and Gatorade. The most successful one was baking soda, and the least successful one was water. I think my favorite out of all three would have to be salt water. Salt water made a very interesting path because instead of branching on top of the wood like baking soda did, salt water went into the wood, and during the experiment, you could see the burns going from under the wood. So after this, after the expo, I plan on cutting the salt water piece open and looking on the inside and seeing all those burns. Um, the second part of my experiment was was creating my cradle and my circuit. So my circuit is what I use to create Listenberg figures. How I did that was I have these two jumper cables. I have these two nodes. The nodes go inside the jumper cables. By the way, do not touch the nodes or the jumper cables when the experiment is happening for anything. Right now, this is unplugged, it's dead, there's nothing that these could do to me. But if you ever get in a situation where you're doing the experiment and you want to adjust your nodes, turn off the switch. If you don't have a switch, unplug the circuit. Do not ever touch it when it's on. Safety is the number one priority in all these experiments. So, the way I hooked these up, I had the nodes, copper nodes, pure copper nodes, and I have them connected to the jaws of the jumper cable, which also happen to be copper. These are connected here and they touch on the ends of the wood and then start the burn. I built this with my dad and a couple electricians on hand. My dad was very helpful in creating the cradle, but I did all of the wiring. What we had to do here, because we had the jumper cables and the copper wire inside the jumper cable that connects this, we couldn't take that out. So what we decided to do was keep those in and then link them to the copper wire coming out of the Allenson power supply. This is creating a tight circuit. It's going to be safe. We put heat shrink around this, making sure it's safe. You always have to make sure safety is the number one priority. Always. Make sure that when you start your experiment, that the positive and negative nodes are not touching. That's going to short it out immediately. And if you have a safe power supply, my power supply was standard, so it had a trip. The trip happens when the circuit shorts out. So once your circuit shorts, you should hear a click at the power supply, and that's going to be it tripping out and stopping the power flow. That if that doesn't happen, then that could be a very unsafe power supply. But in the first place, you should not have had those nodes touching. Never ever let the nodes touch because it's very dangerous, and getting them close can cause arcing. Also, during the experiment, do not wear metal items near it. You have to have protective gloves. Actually, glove right here. This is what we wore during the experiment. These are high electricity gloves. They're made for high electricity. You still definitely should not touch anywhere near the burn while it's happening. Even with the gloves on, that's extremely unsafe. That shouldn't happen. You should not be in arm's reach of that when it's happening. You have to watch from a distance. That's why I did not pan with the camera while I had it or get really close to it because arcing can happen. So you have to stay along, prop your camera, move away. Safety is always the number one priority. After I finished constructing the cradle and wiring everything. Oh, also I wired the light switch and the plug as I already went over. That was nice. It wasn't really a part of my experiment that I expected, but it was a good addition. I felt like I really learned something from that. After that, the burn happened. I burned the three pieces of wood. I also had a spray bottle because when the burn happens, obviously it dries out the piece of wood that it touches where the nodes are touching. So I had the spray bottle just to make sure that the circuit was always staying. But I did observe something during the experiment. Too much water is not good for the burn. So there should be there should be like a soluble coat of water on the top. There should be no puddles, and putting the nodes in puddles will not let you achieve a burn. Sometimes you see on videos how the nodes will just fry all the water. It'll start boiling when there's too much and it pools up. But my power supply was not strong enough to do that, which is not a bad thing at all. The burns still happen. Those power supplies they used were probably microwave transformers. It's not a bad thing. It's just you have to make sure that you don't use too much water because too much water is not going to give you the right circuit. It's just going to charge the water, which might be dangerous. It can cause arcing and things like that. So too much water, too much baking soda, too much Gatorade, too much salt water, any solution you're using is not going to be good. So my results. For my results, I gained that baking soda was the strongest solution. The baking soda solution had the best burn. The burn went across the grain. It went to the sides of the wood. It was great. The least effective solution, well, the least effective burn in general was water, but the least effective solution was Gatorade. The Gatorade solution had short burns, and the burns that happened were not necessarily all fractals. Some of the burns were condensed to one spot, and they did not conduct at all. And they all stuck to the grain. The the Gatorade solution I know would have done better with no grain because when it hit the side of the wood, which didn't have such a hard pattern, it broke away a little bit. Which you can see on my board, it kind of made more of a fragment than it did anywhere on top. Um, uh, my research, I learned a lot. I learned about the natures of positive and negative Lichtenberg figures, which I had no idea about coming in. So there are different natures of Lichtenberg figures that can happen from different energy levels, and it's really cool learning about. It was really cool learning about it. I learned about the porosity of wood and the grains of wood and how hard woods and soft woods could affect my burn. And I tried to look for a soft wood. The softest wood I could find is the one that I use now. It's still really hard. I plan on using mahogany at first, but that's a very hard wood, so I decided to go like shy away from that and just get my regular piece of plywood and do that. If I did the experiment again, I would definitely use a softer wood. Um, I use a softer wood. I may pick different solutions. Choose a different, maybe stronger solution over the Gatorade electrolyte solution. I think I dedicate more of my research to electrolyte solutions because I'm interested in that now. It was really a good topic. It was something that I'm really glad that I did a project on. Um, I also evaluated the time it took for each burn to circuit out. So when a burn short circuits, that's when two of the branches that we're trying to connect. So the two nodes that are trying to find the least path of resistance to each other connect. It shorts the whole circuit because that's basically the wood making a circuit. So let me give you an example. This the entire machine is a circuit starting from the plug. It goes into here, and these two are the positive and negative of the electricity flow. When I put them down on the wood, when the burn starts, they're going to be trying to connect that flow and complete the circuit. But once that circuit completes, it's going to short out. That's one of the very important things because when it shorts out, a fire can start on the wood because of the high energy it's passing through. Most of the times, the fire will start on the wood, and that did happen for the saltwater solution. The fire started inside the wood, which was one of the signs that the burn was going on inside the wood. Um, I also measured the relative coverage. So with the Lichtenberg figures, it's kind of hard to really gauge how it's being covered and how much area it takes up because of the nature of the burn. All the small fractals, all of the branches are hard to measure. So what I did was make relative coverage. So I went with my burn that had the most amount of coverage, which was the saltwater burn. Saltwater burn may not have been as voluminous the as the baking soda one, but the saltwater burn covered more area, so I gave that the max score of I believe, yeah, 200. So the scale is out of 200, 200 being the highest, the lowest being 30 from water. Water was not disappointing because I didn't expect anything out of it, but it was the lowest for sure. I had baking soda at 170 because it took up a lot of area, but not quite as much as the saltwater solution. And I had Gatorade at 130. Gatorade did take up area along the side. That was a lot, but it was fairly disappointing in the amount of burning that happened, fracking that happened. So I gave that a 130 out of 200 on my scale. The scale is relative. Those are not those units are I had to create because I needed something to measure the voluminosity of the scale of the burns. The burns, there's no right now. There's nothing in place to really measure how they burn, which I might be able to look into one day, or maybe even get a measure of my own, like Dr. Turk said. But at the moment, there's nothing really to measure these, so I had to come up with my own scale. Um, the depth of the burns. So as the burns happen, there are main branches where the circuits go through. So if it was a short circuit, it was short circuit through a main branch and not one of the small branches. So the main branches are what connects the circuit. That's the main path it's trying to take, and the branches come off from that. So the depth of the deepest branch for each one, the depth of the deepest branch for for water was 1.6 millimeters. Again, I wasn't expecting much out of water, and I measured this with the vernier caliper, which are very helpful for measuring these type of depth things that I couldn't really do with a ruler or like a meter stick or anything like that, or measuring tape. So that was really helpful. The depth for baking soda was 2.8 millimeters, which I expected is deeper, but the depth for salt water was 4 millimeters. That happened because the salt water went into the wood and it almost penetrated halfway through the wood and threw out. So that made salt water the deepest by far, which I thought was very impressive. That's another reason why I gave it the 200 out of 200 on the luminosity scale. The depth for Gatorade was 1.9 millimeters. Again, not very surprising. The Gatorade burns did not move much. That's why the depth is so much. The Gatorade burns did not travel across the wood, so when it stayed in that spot, it tended to dig in deeper. I think that's similar to what happened with the water. The longer it takes in one spot, the deeper it's going to be, which I think is important to look at because just because baking soda had a lot of area, it's still close to Gatorade in depth. And Gatorade, I'm sorry, just because Gatorade had a lot of area, it's still close to water in depth. Relatively, they're not even close in area, but in depth, they both took a long time to burn, so they both have a similar depth. Baking soda burned faster and it burned stronger. When I say burn stronger, I mean it burned deeper into the wood, and that's why I think it was the best solution. Not only did it have a deep burn, 2.8, but also had a wide burn, and a burn that spread out quickly, and a burn that spread out very effectively. It left marks on the side, it even left marks on the bottom. Sorry about that. In conclusion, I believe my experiment was a success. My hypothesis was correct that baking soda would be the strongest burn out of the four. Um, next time I definitely go for more. I try to do more trials, more experience because this is a really fun experiment. I recommend try it at home, but I recommend try it with professionals. Do not do this in your backyard. Make sure you're safe. Make sure you do a lot of research. It's not something that can happen overnight. It takes time to evaluate your situation, your woods, your solutions, and everything like that, and be absolutely safe. Make sure you have all materials on file. I think it's a good experiment because it's not that expensive. The price is not bad at all. I mean, we got all this stuff for $80. I think it was. The wood, not including the wood, so maybe like $120 because the wood was about $30. The transformer was $40, and everything else after that was what couldn't be more than $40. The jumper cables were not that much. The light switch, everything you can find at Home Depot, other than the transformer and the gloves. You need to order gloves online because you need safety as your first priority. Other than that, I think my experiment turned out really well. I think the best thing that I learned was safety first, being very mindful of my experiment, my surroundings, making sure that everybody around me was safe and knew what was going on. And I really enjoyed this experiment. I definitely do it again. I think I will continue to do Lichtenberg burns in the future. Thank you very much.